My name is Elena Morales. I am 31 years old, and most of my life people have called me the strong one. They say like a compliment, like needing nothing is something to admire. But sitting at my father's dining table that night, holding a warm glass of sparkling juice and a smile I could barely keep on my face, I finally understood what those words really meant. They meant I didn't count. Dad stood at the head of the table and cleared his throat, slow and deliberate, the way he did before big announcements. He looked at my brother Adrian, and his whole face went soft. "For everything you have endured," he said. "This house is yours." The room erupted, clapping, cheering, my aunt pressing both hands to her heart. I sat still. The house, our mother's house, the one Dad always promised would be split between us equally, the one I spent 2 full summers repairing, patching walls, replacing pipes, painting every room, while Adrian and his wife Carla posted beach vacation photos online. A strange laugh escaped me, broken and confused at the same time. "Wait," I said quietly. "What?" Dad looked at me. His eyes were flat. "Already decided. You don't need help, Elena. You have always been the strong one." People nodded around the table as if that answered everything. My chest caved in. Something I had been holding together for years quietly broke apart. The guests left one by one, hugging Adrian, kissing Carla on both cheeks. Nobody hugged me. I stayed behind to help clean up, like always, stacking plates, folding napkins, wiping down counters while the people who had witnessed my humiliation drove home full and satisfied. Dad moved around the kitchen without looking at me. "You will understand one day," he said to the refrigerator. "No," I replied quietly. "I understand right now." He said nothing back. I dried my hands on a dish towel and walked toward the hallway. That was when I heard it. Voices from upstairs, from my mother's old bedroom. Adrian's voice, Carla's laughter, the sound of furniture scraping across the floor. They were already rearranging things. They hadn't waited a single night. I stopped at the bottom of the staircase and put my hand on the banister. The wood was smooth and cool under my palm. I had sanded and refinished this banister myself 18 months ago, on a Saturday, while Adrian was at a golf resort that Dad had paid for. I took one long breath. I put my jacket on. I walked out the front door and sat in my car in the dark driveway for a long time, staring at the house our mother loved, which now belonged to someone who had never fixed a single thing inside it. I want to take you back to when I was 12 years old. It was a Thursday in April, and I had just won first place in the regional mathematics competition. My teacher had called the house the day before to tell Dad personally. He had promised he would be there. He came. He clapped politely when they called my name. But halfway through the awards ceremony, his phone buzzed. He leaned over and told me he had to step out for a minute. That minute became the rest of the evening. Adrian had failed a history test and was crying about it. He had called Dad from school. So Dad left my ceremony to sit with his son and manage his feelings about a failed test. I took the bus home alone, holding my trophy. That night, lying in bed, I worked out something a 12-year-old should never have to work out. The lesson was cold and simple. In this house, excellence earned you independence. Fragility earned you love. The more capable you were, the less anyone felt they needed to show up for you. I never forgot that. I just kept hoping I was wrong. I spent the next 19 years hoping I was wrong. That dinner table finally confirmed I had been right all along. 2 years before the dinner, Dad called me on a wet Tuesday morning. The roof was leaking. Water was coming through the upstairs hallway ceiling, dripping onto the wooden floor our mother had laid herself 30 years ago. He didn't call Adrian. He called me. I drove 40 minutes in the rain with a bag of tools and spent that first weekend patching the leak. I came back the following Saturday to replace the damaged ceiling board. I paid for the materials myself, roughly $400, because when I mentioned the cost to Dad, he said he was a little tight that month. Over the next 18 months, I replaced burst pipes under the kitchen sink, fixed the cracked staircase banister, repainted the living room and both upstairs bedrooms, and replaced 3 broken window frames. I never sent a single invoice, never asked for anything back. It never occurred to me that I needed to. I thought I was caring for something that was partly mine. I thought I was investing in a future I had been promised. I was not. I was renovating a gift for my brother, unpaid, unacknowledged, and invisible, the way I had always been. 3 weeks after the dinner, My phone rang late on a Wednesday night. Dad's name lit up my screen. His voice was smaller than usual. Quieter. "Don't tell your brother," he said before I could speak. "But I might need some financial advice." Something in my stomach dropped. I opened my laptop while he talked. He was vague about it at first, something about the house, some paperwork that had gotten complicated. I asked him to send me what he had. 20 minutes later, documents landed in my email. I read through them slowly. Then I read through them again. Second mortgage on the house, taken out 4 years ago. 2 credit card liens attached to the property. Back taxes, unpaid for 3 years, sitting in a growing pile with late fees. The house Dad had given Adrian was not a free gift. It was a sinking boat, loaded with more debts than Adrian knew about, more than the house could comfortably hold. Underneath all of it, like a rotting foundation, was the truth my father had been hiding from everyone for years. The gala, the toast, the tears and the applause, all of it had been built on a lie. And in 3 months, if nobody acted, the bank would begin foreclosure proceedings. The foreclosure letter didn't arrive at my address. It went to my father's house, which was now legally Adrian's house, which meant it landed in the mailbox of a man who had never dealt with a serious financial document in his adult life. My phone rang at 7:30 on a Friday morning. I was at my desk, halfway through my first coffee. It was Adrian. "You need to fix this," he said. No hello. No context. No acknowledgement that we had barely spoken since the night Dad handed him my inheritance at a dinner party. "Fix what?" I said, keeping my voice even. "The letter. The bank. All of it." He was loud, his words running together. "You're the one who knows this stuff. That's why Dad always called you. So fix it." I held the phone away from my face for a moment and looked out the window. Fix it. Like I was a service he could call and cancel when he didn't need the bill anymore. Like a decade of being the capable one was something I owed him on demand. "I'll look into it," I said. Then I hung up. I did not mean it the way he thought I did. I had no intention of fixing anything for Adrian. But I was absolutely going to look into it, just not in the direction he was expecting. I met Dad at the bank on a Tuesday afternoon. He looked smaller than I remembered, wearing a collared shirt slightly too big for him now, holding a folder of papers against his chest like a shield. We sat across from a loans officer in a small, glass-walled office. Dad talked in circles, the way people do when they are ashamed and cannot say the actual thing directly. The officer was patient. She laid out the numbers plainly, the total debt, the missed payments, the timeline for foreclosure, the auction process if nothing changed. Dad looked at me during the silence that followed. "You can't let strangers take it," he said. Strangers. He meant the bank, as if the bank were the unreasonable one here. "You already gave it away," I reminded him. He flinched. Small, a tightening around his eyes, a slight drop of his shoulders. But I caught it. In 31 years, I had never seen my father look ashamed in front of me. Not once. I turned back to the officer. "Can you walk me through the full process?" I asked. "From today until the auction date?" She nodded and opened her folder. I listened to every word she said with the focused attention of someone who was not here to mourn the situation. I was here to understand it, so I could act. The loans officer's name was Ms. Adeyemi. She had reading glasses on a beaded chain and walked me through everything clearly. The timeline, the missed amounts, the total debt, the auction process if no resolution came. I listened. When she finished, I asked one question. If a private buyer approached the bank before the property went to public listing, would that be possible? She looked at me over her glasses. Depending on the offer, yes. A cash offer, that would move things along considerably. I nodded, thanked her, and told my father I would call him later. He asked what I was thinking. I said I needed to review my options and would be in touch. Both things were true. I did not tell him what I was actually planning. I drove home and sat at my kitchen table with a notepad and a calculator. I had been disciplined with money my entire adult life, saving quietly and steadily because no one had ever offered to catch me if I fell. I pulled up my accounts, ran the numbers twice. Then I called my financial advisor and told her I needed to move some funds. Quickly, and very quietly. I also called a property attorney named Mr. Obi, who came highly recommended and communicated almost entirely by email. Exactly my kind of professional. The day the house was supposed to go to public auction, it didn't. That morning, I sat in Ms. Adeyemi's office at the bank. I had been there 3 times in the previous 2 weeks, each visit short and purposeful. Documents submitted, funds transferred, everything done in the correct order, through the correct channels, with Mr. Obi reviewing every step. The transfer was clean. Cash. No conditions attached. When Ms. Adeyemi slid the deed across the desk, my hand was steady. I signed my name clearly. Elena Morales, owner. The entity on the documents read, Morales Property LLC, formed 3 weeks earlier for exactly this purpose. I walked out of the bank into a cold gray morning. I sat in my car for a few minutes with the folder on my lap. The deed was inside it. The house where I had grown up, where my mother kept a small herb garden by the back door, now belonged to me. Not as a gift, not as a handout. I had paid for it, dollar by dollar, through the correct legal process. I drove home and made tea. I allowed myself 5 minutes of quiet, not celebration, just breathing, and then I got to work on the next step. The hard part wasn't buying the house. The hard part was what came next. I chose a Saturday morning because I knew Adrian would be home. He didn't keep regular hours, he never had, and Carla spent Saturday mornings doing what she called self-care, which usually meant expensive face products and the television. I parked on the street. I walked up the front path, the same path I had relayed myself 3 years ago when the old concrete was crumbling and Dad said the contractor wanted too much. I knocked on the front door. Adrian answered in a t-shirt and shorts, looking relaxed and slightly irritated at being disturbed. When he saw it was me, his expression shifted to something more cautious. What are you doing here? I held out the folder. He took it the way you take something you aren't sure about, carefully at a distance. He opened it, saw the cover letter from Mr. Obi's firm, and started reading. I watched his face change in stages, casual irritation first, then confusion, then a slow, dawning disbelief that drained the color from everything. You don't own this, he said. His voice had gone flat. I do, I said. Carla appeared in the hallway behind him. I reached into my bag and produced the second document. The lease agreement. Monthly amount. Due date. Terms clearly printed. Rent is due on the 1st, I said. Carla posted about it online that same afternoon. I was not surprised. She had always used social media the way some people use a loudspeaker, pointed at whatever hurt you and turned the volume all the way up. The post talked about toxic family, greed, and weaponizing money. She didn't use my name. She didn't have to. Everyone who knew us understood exactly who she meant. My phone buzzed within the hour. Cousins, aunts, old family friends who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly had a great deal to say. How could I do this? Was I not ashamed? Was money really worth more than blood? I read each message once. I did not reply to any of them. Instead, I opened my laptop and sent Adrian a formal email from the LLC address. Brief and professional. It confirmed the lease terms, provided the banking details, and noted the payment due date. Nothing personal. Nothing emotional. Just the facts. My attorney had advised me from the beginning to keep all communication documented, in writing, and in business language. Every exchange recorded, every agreement clear. Not because I expected trouble, though I knew some was coming, but because I had learned long ago that the truth needs evidence. Feelings fade away. Paper stays exactly where you put it. Dad came to my apartment 4 days later. He knocked 3 times. Short and careful, not how he usually knocked. I opened the door. He was wearing his good jacket, which meant he had prepared himself for something difficult. He sat down, refused tea, folded his hands on the table, and looked at me with the expression of a man who had rehearsed what he was going to say but was already losing confidence in it. You are humiliating them, he said. They humiliated me, I replied. That was different. How? He opened his mouth. Then he closed it again. He looked at the table. I had waited years for that silence. Not out of cruelty, not as a triumph, but because I had asked that question inside my head 100 times and could not find an answer, and I needed to know if he had one. He didn't. Dad, I said, keeping my voice level, you gave away something you promised was partly mine. You did it publicly. You did it after years of me maintaining that house and never asking for a single thing. I didn't cause a scene. I found another way forward. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, buttoned his jacket, and left. No argument. No apology. just the sound of my front door closing softly behind him. The first of the month arrived on a Wednesday. I checked the LLC account at 9 in the morning. Nothing there. I checked again at noon. Still nothing. I gave it until 5 o'clock. Then I opened my email and drafted a formal late payment notice using the template Mr. Obi had prepared for exactly this situation. I filled in the relevant dates, kept the language professional, and sent it from the LLC address. By 7 that evening, my phone was ringing. Adrian. I let it ring twice before answering. He was already at full volume when the call connected. He was not calling about the payment. He was calling to tell me I was tearing the family apart, that I was selfish, that what I was doing was unforgivable. His voice cracked at one point, which might have softened me a year ago. It did not soften me now. Adrian, I said when he paused to breathe, this is a lease agreement. Both parties signed it. Payment was due today and has not been received. That is the entirety of what is happening right now. You're treating me like a complete stranger. I'm treating you like a tenant, I said calmly. Which is what you are. He hung up. I documented the call, time, duration, and summary in the LLC file. I ran into Carla at the supermarket 2 weeks later. Not how I had expected the next confrontation to arrive, but Carla had never waited for the right moment. She appeared at the end of an aisle, looking composed and deliberate. She had clearly seen me first. We could contest the sale, she said. No greeting. No pretense. Our lawyer says there might be grounds. I placed a box of oats in my basket. Okay, I said. She blinked. She had expected a bigger reaction. You could lose your money, she said. It would get messy. Carla, I said, turning to face her properly. Your husband's name appears nowhere in this property's ownership history. My father signed the transfer to the LLC voluntarily, with his own legal counsel present. No pressure, no coercion, no fraud. I have the signatures, the timestamps, the bank records, and an attorney who can testify to every detail of that transaction. I picked up another item from the shelf. If you want to contest it, but you should know that I have been documenting everything from the very beginning. Every message, every call, every visit. I smiled, not unkindly, and pushed my trolley around the corner. She did not follow me. The conversation I had both dreaded and needed finally came on a Thursday evening. Dad called and asked if he could visit. His voice was different, tired in a way that went deeper than usual. More honest. He sat at my kitchen table and accepted the tea this time. He told me slowly he had borrowed money to cover Adrian's wedding, more than he had ever admitted to anyone. Then there was Adrian's business idea, a clothing import venture that failed within its first year. Then Carla's apartment renovation that went far over budget. Dad had covered everything, quietly, one loan at a time. He told himself Adrian just needed one more chance to find solid ground. I thought he would collapse without me, he said. And me? I asked. He looked at his cup. You never needed me. That sentence sat between us in the silence. It was the most painful thing I had heard through all of this, more painful than the dinner, more painful than the deed, more painful than any of it. Because the truth was, I had needed him. At 12 years old. At 20. At 25. I had simply learned too early that needing him was something I couldn't afford. I didn't say that aloud. I just nodded slowly and let the silence hold what words couldn't. The second month's rent did not arrive either. I had half expected it. Not because I hoped for it, but because this was the pattern I had watched my whole life with Adrian. Not malicious, exactly. More like a deep and unshakable belief that the rules applying to other people would eventually bend for him. That someone would step in. That someone always did. I waited 3 days before acting. Then I had Mr. Obi prepare a formal eviction warning letter. Under the lease, 2 missed payments triggered the process. The notice was sent by registered mail on a Friday morning. By Friday afternoon, 2 neighbors had texted me. They had seen Adrian sitting on the front step in his coat, holding the letter, for almost an hour. One of them asked if everything was all right. I thanked her and said it was a legal matter being handled properly. This time, the family messages were quieter. People were starting to ask more questions about the second mortgage, about the loans, about how Dad had given away a house he didn't fully own. The wave of public sympathy surrounding Adrian and Carla was beginning to thin at the edges. Truth has a way of leaking out, even when nobody is actively pouring it. He came to my apartment on a Tuesday night, and he came alone. No Carla. No prepared argument. He hadn't called ahead, just knocked. When I opened the door, I barely recognized his face. Not because he looked different physically, but because the performance was gone. He wasn't angry. He wasn't posturing. He looked like a person who had run completely out of the energy it takes to pretend. I let him in. He sat on the couch and looked at his hands. "I always thought you would catch me," he said quietly. "If things got bad enough, you would catch me." That was the moment. Not the dinner. Not the deed. Not the eviction warning. This was what broke something open in me. Not into anger, but into a kind of grief I had not let myself feel before. Because he was not wrong. He was describing something real. A lifetime of watching me absorb consequences without complaint had taught him a lesson, the same way the math trophy had taught me one. He had learned that Elena would handle it. He had never built anything solid because there had always been a net beneath him. "I know," I said gently, not as an excuse, as an honest acknowledgement of how the same family had shaped us into completely different kinds of people. Carla left on a Saturday. I heard about it through my cousin Petra, who lived 2 streets from the house and paid attention to things. According to her, Carla loaded her car in 3 trips, clothes, boxes, the expensive coffee machine from the wedding gift table. She moved efficiently and without visible emotion. She drove away without a single backward glance at the house. I thought about that for a while, about the kind of person who could pack up a life in 3 trips and leave without looking back, about what their marriage had actually been built on. How much of Carla's presence had ever truly been about Adrian versus what Adrian had access to through my father's money. When I heard she had moved in with a friend across the city, I felt nothing toward her except a distant, almost impersonal kind of pity. Adrian called me that evening. He didn't cry. He wasn't the type. He just sounded hollow, like a room where all the furniture has been removed. He asked if we could talk. "Not about the house," he said. "Just talk. I'll call you this week," I told him. And I meant it. But first things needed to come first. The missed payments were still missed. The lease was still a contract. I had a responsibility to finish what I had started cleanly. We met at a coffee shop near my office on a Wednesday afternoon. Adrian arrived before me, which surprised me. He sat by the window with a cup he wasn't drinking, watching the street. When I sat across from him, he got straight to it.
The conference room was cold and professional. Lawyers on both sides, the developers' representatives, bank officials. Papers stacked in neat piles. I signed my name 27 times. Each signature transferring another piece of Dad's life work to someone else, but also freeing me from the weight of it. The funds wired to my account before we left the building. Final signatures completed.
Portfolio gone.
Debt cleared. Future secured. I walked out of that office lighter than I'd felt in months. The properties would be maintained. The tenants would be protected. The staff would keep their jobs. I'd negotiated everything Dad would have cared about. And now I could finally breathe. I drove to the coast that afternoon, parked at a lookout point, and watched the ocean until the sun started setting. My phone buzzed with congratulations from my lawyer, confirmation from the bank, automated messages about the transfer. I turned it off. For the first time since Dad died, I sat in silence and let myself feel everything. Relief.
Grief.
Freedom. All of it. Months later, I launched a consultancy. Property management for people who inherited assets they didn't understand. I helped families navigate the complicated emotions and practical realities of generational wealth. Clients trusted me because I'd survived betrayal. Because I understood that sometimes protecting a legacy means letting go of what it looked like and saving what it meant. My business grew faster than I expected. Referrals came from lawyers, from financial advisors, from tenants who remembered that I'd fixed their apartments when nobody else cared. One morning, a business journal featured my company in an article about women reshaping estate management. They used the phrase compassionate pragmatism. I liked that. Daniel saw the article. He sent an email. Subject line: proud of you. I deleted it without reading past that. He didn't get to be proud now. He'd had his chance to be a partner, and he chose to be a spectator betting against me. That ship had sailed and sunk. I visited Dad's grave on a Saturday morning. The grass was growing back after winter, small green shoots pushing through the cold earth. I knelt beside the headstone. Someone had left flowers, probably Mom. I didn't bring any. Just myself and the words I'd been holding. I didn't protect the house, I whispered. I'm sorry if that's what you wanted. The wind moved through the cemetery trees, making them whisper back. But I protected what you built. The real thing, not the symbol. Dad had given Olivia the house because that's what she needed. Something visible, something she could point to and say, I mattered. But he'd given me the portfolio because he knew I'd understand what it represented. Years of work, relationships with tenants, responsibility to people who depended on stable housing. He'd given me the hard part because he trusted me with hard things. She finally understands, I said. Olivia. She sent a letter. I didn't tell him I hadn't responded yet, that I was still deciding if forgiveness was possible or even necessary. The headstone was quiet, offering no advice. That was okay. I didn't need advice anymore. I'd made my choices, lived with the consequences, built something new from the wreckage. Thank you, I whispered, for trusting me. I stood up and walked back to my car. The house was just wood and brick. The portfolio was strategy and planning. But what Dad truly left me was proof I was never weak. He showed me that strength isn't about being loud or demanding attention. It's about knowing your value when everyone else tries to convince you you're worthless. Mom calls sometimes now. Short conversations about weather and neutral topics. We're not close, but we're not enemies. Olivia got a job in property management at a small firm downtown. She's learning the work I did for years. We had coffee once, awkward and careful. She's trying. That's something. Daniel remarried. I heard through mutual friends. I felt nothing. The consultancy keeps growing. I hired 3 staff members. We're expanding to help families in other states. Last week, a woman came to my office crying because her siblings were fighting over their mother's estate. I held her hand and said, I understand. And I did. Dad gave Olivia the symbol. He gave me the future. And I sold the portfolio not for revenge, but for freedom. Real freedom, the kind that comes from knowing you can survive anything, even family.
I stood in the hallway for a while without moving. Eventually, Dad's car pulled up outside. He came in through the front door I had left unlocked. He looked at the empty rooms without speaking. After a very long silence, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said 3 words. I chose wrong. Simple. Plain. Unadorned. They landed somewhere very deep inside me, in a place that had been waiting a long time to hear them. I did not say anything. I just nodded once. I repainted the house over 3 weekends in spring. Not alone this time. I hired a contractor named Beezy who ran her own small renovation business and had excellent reviews. I paid her properly and on time. I bought the paint myself, in colors I chose without asking anyone's opinion. I replaced the kitchen fixtures that had been loose for 2 years. I had a plumber assess the pipes under the bathroom. I bought a new front door, solid wood, painted a dark olive green, because the old one had warped through the winter and I had always meant to replace it. When it was done, I walked through every room alone. It smelled like fresh paint and clean air. Afternoon light came through the windows in long pale rectangles, pooling on the wooden floor exactly as I had always remembered. I stood in my mother's bedroom. It would always be my mother's bedroom, and let myself feel the full weight of the past year. Not bitterness. I had made a conscious decision somewhere in those months to put bitterness down. It was too heavy and too familiar, and it had never once served me well. What I felt instead was something lighter, cleaner, a quiet, private kind of freedom I had never felt in this house before. Not because I had won something, because I had, at long last, arrived somewhere that actually belonged to me. I did not move into the house. I thought about it carefully and decided against it. The house carried too much history in its walls, some of it beautiful, most of it complicated, and I was building something new. I needed space that was mine without conditions or memory attached. Instead, I rented it out at market rate. The couple who took it were in their late 20s, newly married, saving toward a place of their own. They reminded me of no one I knew, which felt like a clean start. They signed the lease on a Saturday, shook my hand, and thanked me more warmly than I had expected. 2 months after they moved in, Dad came to my apartment. He knocked that careful three-knock way he had been using since the night he tried to tell me I was humiliating Adrian. He came in and sat down and did not ask me for anything, which had become its own kind of language between us. We talked for an hour. Small things. Books. Work. The weather. At the end, as he was putting on his jacket at the door, he paused. "You didn't destroy us," he said. "No," I replied. "I just stopped saving everyone." He nodded slowly. He put one hand briefly on my shoulder. Then he left. I stood at the window and watched his car pull away into the early evening light. The strong one. The one who never needed anything. For the first time in 31 years, I did not feel strong in that hollow, obligated way. I felt something better. Something that was genuinely and fully mine. I felt respected. And it turned out, that was what I had been working toward all along.